Welcome to Chefs in the City. I'm Ann Fisher, along with my co-hosts, Steve Stover and Rich Tarapak. If you want to know more about us, where we come from, what our backstory is, check out our first episode. We lay it all out there. Patrick Allen is an internationally known importer of handcrafted, high-quality wines from artisan estates, primarily in the south of France. For more than 20 years, he and his wife, Connie, have researched and tasted wines, tough job, from hundreds of wineries, ultimately creating a unique portfolio of exceptional wines. Patrick also hosts regular wine dinners at the Refectory, wine tasting and educational events at Carfagna's, and he's creating a wine program at the Columbus State Culinary School. So welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Let's just jump right in and
Sure.
talk about what the news of the day is and might likely be the news of the next 4 years, which is the uncertainty about tariffs. President Trump is threatening a 200% tariff on champagne and wine from Europe, which includes France.
Exactly.
What's been your reaction to this? What are people in your business talking about?
Well, it's really put a chill on the wine business right now. The problem is when you're importing wine from France or from anywhere in Europe, you have to plan 2 to 3 months out. So right now, there's no clarity on what's going to happen. So it's the uncertainty of what's going to happen that has made it almost impossible for us to import wines right now. Because if there's a 200% tariff on wine, for example, if I order $50,000 worth of champagne, to just get it out of customs, it would cost me $100,000, and you can't recoup that. So the thing that people really don't understand about tariffs is it's not the increased price that's the problem. If a bottle of wine is $2 or $3 more on the shelf, the end consumer can either choose to buy it or not buy it. It's not that big of a deal. But as an importer, you have to plan these things out, and you have to pay the tariff in advance. So it's a tax on the importer or distributor that's importing the wines. So even a 25% tariff just destroys your cash flow, because in order to get that wine out of customs, you have to pay 25% of the value of the wine in order to get it out of customs.
Wow.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but are most importers independent or relatively independent? It's not like these corporate juggernauts with
so there are
billions
some
of
huge, very large importers that have the means to deal with
the Krogers of the world, that kind of thing?
In the U.S. it's a 3-tier system. So retailers have to buy from distributors, and distributors generally buy from importers. Some distributors also import. The larger distributors also import their own wines. But generally, you have to pass from an importer to distributor to the store. So Kroger just buys from distributors. So the wine is already here when Kroger buys it. Okay. But an importer, once you buy the wine and you bring it in, you have your suppliers to pay, the wineries you have to pay eventually. So if you're paying 25% upfront of the value, you can increase your price, but your cash flow is turned upside down at that point.
Yeah. Wow.
So if you're essentially paying all of your profit before you sell a single bottle, even if you raise your price, your cash flow is decimated at that point. I'll give you a very good example. Right now with a 200% tariff, you're essentially, you could lose your business at that point. So our distributor in Ohio has 2 containers on the water. So one of the things that a lot of people don't realize that is if you have wine in transit and they put the tariff on, that tariff is due when the wine lands.
Even though it's already left
before they announce the tariff. So they have 2 containers of wine on the water.
Arrives.
So their exposure right now is, if there's a 200% tariff, is over $400,000. They're out of business at that point. That means that all the salespeople that they hire, the drivers, they will be out of jobs.
But all right, so your stock and trade is this, though. I mean, you trade in French wines.
Exactly. I can't.
What do you do?
So a retailer can switch. They can start selling wines from other wares.
Exactly.
I'm done. That just ends because I'll have to find something else to do.
Okay, end of show.
Exactly. So that's essentially the predicament a lot of these people are in. What the larger companies that we were talking about earlier have been doing is they've been stockpiling wines. As soon as Trump was elected, they knew there was a threat of tariffs. So starting in November, people were laying in large, if they could afford to, large quantities of wines. I was just in New York working with a bunch of French winemakers, and we did a round table with other importers and distributors.
What are they saying?
They're afraid. They don't know what's going to happen. And so one of the importers that I was doing this with in New York, they laid in $7 million worth of Bordeaux at the end of last year in anticipation that there might be tariffs. So if you're a small importer like me, there's no way I can afford to lay in $7 million worth of inventory and just sit on it.
Yeah.
But the other thing that could happen is even if there are no tariffs, there's going to be a lot of extra inventory that people are going to try to get rid of. So there might be a wine glut, or there might be a penury of wines. We don't know which way it's going to go.
But just for now, because the fact is,
or there could be
tariffs,
nothing.
This could go on for 4 years.
Exactly.
The instability.
It's the thing is, when I order a wine from a producer, we have to organize the shipment, and that takes a couple weeks. Then there's 2 to 3 weeks of maybe transit. So we're really planning at least 2 months out before. If we place an order, we're usually getting it in 8 weeks to 3 months, right in that time frame. So in that time frame, lots of things could change. So right now, the U.S. government has said they're going to make an announcement about tariffs on April 2nd. So we've suspended all of our shipments from France until April 2nd. So
it's not April 2nd yet, folks.
That's exactly.
It will be soon.
April 2nd of 2025. So I imagine we'll know by the time you hear this, you'll know what's going to happen. But for us, that means that all of our orders I've pulled a couple orders off of containers because I didn't want the exposure of having paid twice the value of the wine when it lands. So that means we're going to have lots of wine items out of stock. We're out of champagne. We're out of a lot of things that I'd like to have. But if I order them, it could literally ruin us. If we have $100,000 of wine on the water, and I have to pay $200,000 just to get it out of customs before I sell a bottle, there's no way to recoup.
No.
What an impact on small business. It's just incredible.
I know. It's people's livelihoods. Yeah. And if it would be one thing if they said, we're going to start putting a 200% tariff on wine this date, no matter what. You can plan and say, all right, well, I've got to shut down operations, not ship wine, whatever. But we don't know. And then they could come along and say, well, there's only going to be a 50% tariff. Well, that would still put us out of business. It's
Wow. Well, if they want to taste French wine after the tariffs come on board, you're going to take them to France to
I will take them to France to do that. That's the best. That'll be much cheaper. Guide. Exactly. Well, we've got some tours planned, and we can talk about that if you like.
Tours,
yeah.
That's another way to do it. I'm wondering how much of the French wine market is American, from American demand.
Oh, this is the largest market for a lot of people. Europe is a big market for French wines, but the U.S. is a huge market for French and European wines. It's and a lot of our distributors, and one of the things that a lot of Californian winemakers are against the tariff as well. You'd think that they would be for it because that would give them open up the market for them. But one of the Californian what the Californian winemakers realize is that a lot of the distributors they sell to, 50-60% of their sales could be European wines.
And if they can't
get those, then they have to lay off their salespeople. They can't afford as many trucks. They can't afford to buy more Californian wines. So it's all a symbiotic relationship. Yeah. So a lot of these distributors use European wines to keep the lights on and make it possible to sell Californian wines as well. So it's a more complicated equation.
Terrible domino effect.
Exactly.
And the uncertainty, once again, we come back to that always.
Exactly.
Geez,
on a cheerier note.
Let's shift gears. Steve, take it away.
Well, tell us how you got into the wine business.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I got into the wine business by accident. I was living in France after college, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do.
Not a bad place to have to be stuck there.
Exactly.
About
So I was teaching. I was teaching English in France and kind of backpacking around Europe a little bit. And then when I came home, I thought I'd go to grad school, but I had no idea what I was going to go to grad school for. And I went to dinner at a friend's house, and they suggested that the Andersons was a good wine shop. I was asking about where to get wine now in Columbus, and I'd never been to the Andersons before, so I went there and was buying a bottle of wine, and I asked the guy on the floor, what about the wine? He didn't know anything about the wine. He said, by coincidence, the importer of that wine happens to be here. So it was a guy, Bobby Catcher, and he was there, and we started speaking half in French and half in English about the wine. And I didn't think much about it. And I was leaving the store, and the manager of the store ran after me, and he said, if you ever want a job here, just let me know. And I said, no, thanks. I wasn't that interested. And then after a couple of days, I'm not doing anything. Why don't I work there for a few weeks while I decide what I want to do? And I ended up staying there for 3 years, becoming one of the wine buyers. And from there, I moved back to France to Burgundy and worked with a woman who was a famous exporter of Burgundy, Becky Wasserman, who just recently passed away. And then in Burgundy, that was kind of my PhD of wine. That was a fantastic experience because my job was to take importers and distributors to all the most famous domains in Burgundy and taste wine with them and translate with them. And that was just an
Tough
amazing.
duty.
Yeah,
it was,
nice gig.
That was a good
Nice
gig.
gig for sure.
It was a good gig. My wife calls me the Mr. Magoo of food and wine. I fall into stuff.
That is pretty amazing, though, when you think about it. Because I was going to ask you, I mean, just as far as people not knowing about wine and how you teach them about wine, you sort of learned on the fly?
Yeah, and
You
that's kind of
formally trained at
no.
yeah.
I mean, so when I
that's
was
kind of heartening, actually.
well, when
to
I
those
was
of
living
us.
in France, our next door neighbor in Lyon was a woman. She was a doctor, and her husband was a famous chemist who loved wine. And one of the things he did was sell chemicals to wine growers in Burgundy. He loved Burgundy. So when I got to Lyon, her cellar was about 10,000 bottles of
Nice neighbor.
Yeah, exactly. 1961 Échezeaux, 1962 Grand Échezeaux, and 1959 Pommard. Those are all great vineyards of Burgundy, wines I can't afford even in the new vintages of. And every Sunday she'd come over for lunch and bring about 6 bottles. And that was my education in Burgundy. Wow. And from there is when I came back and got figured out that I liked wine and wanted to work in the wine business.
Magoo is pretty apt.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
How do you find why the south of France? That's what your focus is.
Sure. So after
Better weather. I
well,
for the grapes?
actually no. That's kind of a good thing and a bad thing, and that's why we're in the south of France. So after Burgundy, rather than moving back to Columbus, my wife and I got engaged at that time and moved to New York. And in New York, we worked for different distributors and importers for about 6 years, and then after those 6 years, we were kind of at a crossroads, and we're like, do we do this for other people or do this for ourselves? And that's when we decided to start our own importing company. And the south of France is, well, we love the south of France because it's a beautiful place to be. But the other thing about the south of France is it's sort of like the Wild West of French winemaking. Huh. Because conditions are so good for winemaking in the south of France, people have planted vines all over the place, and it's just been a vast ocean of wine for a couple centuries. And actually, a lot of the vineyards we work with were actually planted by the Romans. And so for the last 200 years, the south of France supplied the French army with wine. I mean, it was just an ocean of just mediocre wine. But over the last 20 years, or even less than the last 20 years, winemakers are seeing, are traveling, and they're seeing what other places can do. And because of all of the New World winemaking, because of all the wine from California, all the wine from New Zealand, Australia, and a lot of it's mechanically farmed, these bulk wines from the south of France can't compete because a lot of it's hand done, even though it's bulk production wines. So what's happened to a lot of these growers that have these amazing hillside vineyards with old vines, what people would kill to have, they're not getting paid by the cooperatives and these negociants that they sell the grapes or wine or juice to, the cost that it costs them to produce the wine. So they're like, I've got 100-year-old vines on amazing hillsides, and I'm not even getting paid the cost to grow the grapes. So what's happened over the last 20 years is these young winemakers who have traveled and seen the world a bit are, for the first time, bottling their own wines. So you're finding these amazing vineyards and wines that even though a lot of these the vineyard areas have been making wine since Roman times, are practically unknown. Wow. And so because of that, you have these amazing high-quality wines that are still at affordable prices. And that's why we decided to move to the south of France. We drove the back roads for a year trying to find small wineries. And our goal when we first started out was to find 8 or 9 wineries we'd really be proud to represent. And after a year of driving the back roads, we found about 35 wineries that we were really excited about. And the first thing we did was send a pallet of samples back to Columbus, to a friend of ours who was a distributor here. And so my job in New York was selling wine to the high-end restaurants, Daniel, Jean-Georges, all those places in New York. And so the first thing I did was, once our samples arrived, as I got our samples together and then took them to these top sommeliers that are going to be completely brutally honest.
In Columbus?
No, in New York.
Okay,
I went to Jean-Georges and Daniel and tasted with those
I
guys.
I see.
And it was kind of, it takes, like I said, months for the wine to get here. So the last time I tasted these wines, I was in the south of France with lavender fields, and it's beautiful.
Ambiance.
And exactly. And now I'm in Jean Georges. Actually, it was one of my favorite places in the basement. And I'm like tasting wine over a garbage can. There's a guy breaking down fish next to me, and I'm like, I don't know if this is maybe it was the atmosphere that maybe it got to me.
The romance of it. Yeah.
Exactly. But everybody, without exception, really liked what we were doing. They were excited about it, and that's what gave us the confidence to move forward with our company.
Very neat.
So that's how you find. I've been lucky enough to visit at least 8 or 10 of your clients in the south of France, and what remarkable is that you find these places and you take them under your wing, maybe help them design a label.
Yeah, we've redone some labels for the people.
And then they become famous. Isabel Ferrando.
Oh, she was famous before I was.
Well,
I'm not going to take
now
credit for her. She's great.
She is the hottest winemaker in the south of France, I think, and Domaine de la Biscarrosse.
Yeah, they make fantastic
husband
wines
and wife.
as well. Exactly, they make fantastic wines. So when we look for a new wine, I mean, one thing, we taste wines all the time. And one of the things, if you've been in the wine business for long enough, you realize that almost anybody can make a good wine by once accidentally.
Yeah.
And we want people that are going to be consistent. So we taste the wine and we like it, but the most important thing we do is first we visit the winery to make sure the winemaking is clean, the winemaker's progressive, thoughtful. We always see how they work in the winery. But I think the most important thing we do is the last thing, and is to walk the vineyards. My wife is a trained geologist, so she kind of explains to me what we're seeing as far as the soil, the geology of the vineyards. But there's a saying in the wine business that you can't make great wine without great grapes, and you can't have great grapes without great vineyard sites. And if all those elements come together, if we find that they have really good wines, clean winemaking, and great vineyard sites, that's what really convinces us to work with them. Because we don't want people to make good wine. We want them to make progressively better wines. We want to be able to improve as well.
Okay. All right. And I'm just kind of wondering, when you mentioned the soil and everything, and what it'd be interesting to talk to your spouse as well about climate change and what kind of impact that's had on such a specific location as the south of France.
Yeah. Well, you can see it right away in the south of France because there are a lot of things that are growing in the vineyards that were never there before. You can see cactuses in the south of France that weren't there before. Yeah. But the thing is, France has a bit of an advantage when it comes to climate, at least for now, is that usually in France, all the different regions are planted right at the edge of where things will ripen. So that's what gives them one of the hardest things to achieve in winemaking is a natural balance of fruit and acidity. And with the vineyards being planted right at the edge, like Burgundy, where Pinot Noir is right at the edge of being ripe, will give you a nice fruit and acidity balance. So what we're seeing now is we're getting some riper vintages. But in the south of France, it's hot normally. So being a degree or two warmer has changed things slightly. But the thing that's more insidious about climate change when it comes to winemaking is the order of things have changed. So you might have a slightly warmer January, February, and the vines start to grow or grow again. And then because of January, February, you have a frost and it kills everything. So the order in which things progress in the vineyards has been disrupted a bit, and that's made it challenging for winemakers. And the other thing that's happened, especially when you're down way in the south of France towards the border of Spain, is there's been a horrible drought. So they've almost had no rain for 2 years. I mean, it's to the point where vines are pretty resilient. The roots can go hundreds of feet into the soil to get water, but even those water reserves are gone. And different kinds of agriculture, like they grow apricot trees there in the south of France, down towards the border of Spain, in the Roussillon. It's been so dry that the trees just fall over.
Wow!
Jeez.
The roots just they uproot themselves because they're so dry. So there are challenges, but it's not always the obvious things like just being warmer. It can be a little bit more complicated than that.
And it's not just cyclical. This doesn't happen every 25 years.
No, it's I mean, a lot of these people have owned these vineyards for generations, and they track how when they've harvested over the last 100, 150 years, and they've never seen everything's much earlier. So harvest is happening earlier because it's warmer. There's less water. I mean, you really there's not a lot of rain in the south of France in the summer, but over the winter you get a lot of rain, and that's what kind of replenishes the water reserves underground.
Yeah, the water tables. Yeah,
exactly.
On a cheerier note,
Yes.
Here he goes again.
you're taking a group to France.
Yes.
To Lyon.
Yes, exactly. So I spent a lot of time growing up in Lyon. Both my parents were professors here in Columbus at Ohio State. And in the summer, they worked in Lyon, France. So from the time I was 3 months old, I spent about 2 or 3 months every summer in Lyon. And that's where I really got my appreciation for French wine and French food. And that's where I learned to speak French. And so as we said earlier, I do a lot of events at the refectory and different tastings around town. And whenever I do one of these events, people ask me, would you ever want to take a group to France? And I know chefs and I know wineries and I know places to visit and interesting things to see and do, but I don't know anything about hotels, buses, planes, logistics, that kind of stuff. So about a year ago, I was doing a wine event, a dinner at Columbus State, and someone asked me the same question. I gave you the answer I just gave you. And the woman said, well, I'm a travel agent, so if you can put together
We can do
the itinerary. So we've been working on this here for about a year, exactly.
Yeah.
And so
I was at the dinner.
Exactly, you were there.
Too, right.
And it was, for a first trip, I really wanted to do something I was very familiar with. And so I chose Lyon, which is the gastronomic capital of France. And the whole tour is just trying to show why Lyon is the gastronomic capital of France, because it's situated right between Burgundy to the north, the northern Rhone Valley to the south. You have the Alps to the east, so you get the water from the Alps. You get the great wines of Burgundy, the cheeses from all these different regions. So we're going to go visit the most famous chicken in the world, Poulet de Bresse, is just north of Lyon. So we're going to go visit a chicken farmer. We're going to go visit a friend of mine who's a winemaker in the Beaujolais. We're going to go taste at a great winery in the northern Rhone. So,
And you're going to dine.
oh yeah, we're going to at least 3 Michelin-starred restaurants. We're going to go to Bocuse, which is he was voted chef of the century for the last century.
Oh, big deal.
Exactly. We're going to go to La Mère Brasier, which was she was his mentor, and then we're going to go to Chez Point. So those are 3 iconic restaurants around Lyon. But then we're also going to visit the little tiny, what the Lyonnais call bouchons, the little tiny restaurants that really gave Lyon its reputation.
That's what I kind of
That's what I love too.
for,
Yes,
is
exactly.
just where they tell you what you're having. You don't get to pay.
That's exactly
Here's
right.
what's for dinner.
So
It's in
Tell me
one of
because I
those-
can't read the chalkboard.
It's in one of those bouchons that one of our friends coined the term "eat through the pay."
Exactly. So yeah, I think people have to pace themselves on this trip, but it should be an absolutely amazing time. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, yeah, I would love to hear about it next time you come on.
Absolutely.
All right.
And your tastings. You've got
Oh,
some-
yeah. So I do have a couple tastings coming up. I've got one on April 18th at Columbus State's The Mix, and that's going to be on the Loire Valley. And then
you haven't done that yet.
no, I haven't done a Loire one yet, so that should be fun. I love wines from the Loire, and it's a fascinating, diverse area. It's actually one of the largest wine producing regions of France, but it's relatively unknown in the States, except for everybody knows Sancerre. And Vouvray. And then I'm doing on April 28th another night in Lyon dinner at the refectory, and that's something we've been doing.
But the 5th one you've done.
I think it's way more than that now at this point. Years ago, I was, Lyon, as I was saying, is the gastronomic capital of France. Chef Richard Blandin at the refectory is from Lyon. He was actually at Bocuse. He worked at Bocuse, and years ago, I was like, you don't have any Lyonnais dishes on the menu at the refectory. You should change that. And he's like, people really don't get it here. And I was like, well, you ever done a Lyonnais dinner just to show? And he's like, no, we've never done anything. I'm like, well, we got to change that. So we did a Lyonnais dinner. And I don't remember how many. It was pre-COVID. How many years ago it was now. And it sold out. We had to do 3 of those dinners just to keep up with
Satisfy the
demand.
demand, yeah.
Exactly. And so almost every year since then, except for a little hiatus during COVID, we've done these night Lyon dinners where he does classic Lyonnais dishes, and I pair wines with them. And I just talk about the
lot of
place
fun.
and the-
Yeah. So
and
if you
the
can't
wine.
go to France, go to the
Yes.
refectory.
Yeah, next best thing.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today,
No.
Patrick Allen. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Patrick Allen, internationally known importer of handcrafted, high-quality wines from artisan estates, primarily in the south of France. It's been fun to talk about, but that's about it for now. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Chefs in the City. Share it with all of your friends. You can find us wherever wherever you get your podcasts. And you can check us out on Facebook at Ann Fisher's Chefs in the City. And our email is chefsinthecity111@gmail.com. Give us a jingle on that if you're interested in a question or comment. Thanks again.
Boxland Media. Think big.